What's up, guys? You are watching Fight Feed. Today, I'm going to be breaking down Season 9, Week 9 of Dana White's Contender Series. That is happening on October 6th or 7th, I believe. If you guys enjoy these breakdown videos, please do me a favor. Give this a thumbs up. If you're feeling kind, you can also hype this video up on your end. That would be greatly appreciated by myself because the way I understand it, hyping and giving likes, commenting, all of these things are tied into what will allow my video to be pushed out to others who engage with the MMA space and content. So if you guys could do me a solid there, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you guys. Now, before I go in and break down this full card, I just want to call out another example, guys, of how quickly things change. All right. So I started working on my picks for week 9 of Contender Series today, actually. And that was this morning, right? So I went and did all my research, pulled stuff together, refreshed the Tapology page to find out that, as you guys can see, this first fight, Jimmy Page Jr. pulled out. So this fight's no longer even happening. And there's another fight on the card that was earlier today, a rumored bout that is now happening. So as it stands, guys, there's only 4 bouts that I'm going through here because that is all that was available on Tapology. As we've seen in the past, there's likely a chance a new bout will get added after this video. So if that does happen, I'll try to provide you guys who I'm picking, but it's not going to be in the video regardless. Just wanted to call that out and also make sure you guys are all in tune with all the changes that happen week over week, whether it be on a standard fight night card or Dana White's Contender Series card. There's always the chance that someone falls out of the fight, and here we are. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and dive into the first fight of Contender Series Week 9, and we're not going to start on this page because, as I mentioned, it's not happening. Now, where we will begin is on the first fight of the card, assuming this happens, that it's not a rumored bout anymore. Obviously, it doesn't show as rumored anymore, but you never know. My understanding is that this fight is happening, but it is a fight between Lucas Caldas and Magomed Zaynukov. Okay. Caldas, 29 years old, 6 feet tall. This is a lightweight bout, so they're fighting at 155 pounds. So definitely, you got 2 guys that are pretty tall for that lightweight division. No reach is listed for almost any of these fighters, which shouldn't shock you guys, but 6-1 record on the side of Caldas, a 7-0 record on the side of Zaynukov, right? Now, diving into the wins and losses of these gentlemen, Caldas had 6 of his 6 wins, a 100% finish rate, and not only just a finish rate, but it's a 100% KO rate. Now, when we look at his losses, he has 1 loss on his record. I've listed it as a decision loss, but it's technically a disqualification loss. He apparently stomped his opponent illegally. So take that info and do what you will with it. I feel like the fact that his only loss is by way of stomping on his opponent shows that he was probably in a dominant position in the first place, right? We saw that with John Jones with the illegal elbows, which are now legal. Now, taking a look at Zaynukov, he has 5 of his 7 wins by KO, which is a decent KO rate at 71%, and then 28% of his wins, or 2 of his 7, by decision. Now, losses, nothing to write home about there because he has none, right? So we'll just move along here. Caldas is on a 1-fight win streak. Now, that 1-fight win streak kind of has a bit of an asterisk because, as you guys know, he technically has not lost as a professional in MMA. His only loss is by way of disqualification. Now, technically speaking, that's a loss, right? So it is 1 win, but you could argue he is 7-0 or 7-0 or 6-0 and then just scrap that other fight. But he last fought on May 2nd, 2025. Last 4 fights, spell it out for you guys. He had a win over Luis, who was 6-6. Then that loss to Gomez, who was 7-5. That was the DQ. A win over Bruno, 6-4, and a win over Guerra, 3-1. Now on the side of Zaynukov, 7-fight win streak because he's 7-0. Last fought on February 22nd, 2025. He had a win over Sadagov, 7-0, a win over Poles, 6-2, a win over Manarabek, 3-1, and then a win over Ashanikov, 9-4. When we look at Caldas and Zaynukov and their intangibles, X factors, so neither one of them is the home fighter. They're both going to have a ton of pressure. This is Contender Series. They're fighting for a contract, of course. Red flags I have for Caldas, guys, is a lot of his opponents have pretty shoddy records, right? Like the guy's 6-6, a 7-5, a 6-4. It seems that the only opponent, at least in recent history, that had a decent record was Guerra at 3-1, which is also not the best record in the world either. So that's a red flag that I would call out as just questioning some of the competition there. And then one thing that I'm going to call out too is from an other variable perspective is obviously this guy has some powerful hands. A lot of his KOs are by way of punches. Obviously 6 of his 6 wins all by KO says that he has some nuclear type power once he gets in there with his opponent. Now, on the side of Zaynukov, also not a home fighter, tons of pressure, fought in UAE Warriors. And okay, so that is not necessarily a red flag in and of itself, but I have seen some guys from UAE Warriors make their way to the UFC. For instance, Muhammad Yahya, who literally, once he was in the UFC, I'm pretty sure he was undefeated before, or maybe had very minimal losses, but every person he's fought in the UFC has absolutely smoked him, right? So because of that, it could be a red flag. I'm not saying that it necessarily is one in this particular case, but as a red flag in this slide, I've called it out. You know, he does have some good wins over guys with good records, but it's like, do we have to fact check that, right? We have to see him in the litmus test of Dana White's Contender Series. And then another variable is, it's a bit interesting that Magomed being, Russian, he doesn't have any wins by submission, which is a bit surprising. Generally speaking, a lot of the Russian fighters, they come from a combat sambo background, and generally that I think includes a lot of grappling, which also then includes some of those submission attacks, right? And so in this case, it was kind of surprising to see that, but he's not the first Russian fighter that we've seen with that type of thing on their record. Nonetheless, I am picking Zaynukov, guys. The reason I'm picking Zaynukov, I think that, obviously this year I've done very well in my picks going with Russians, actually. I don't think I've gotten any of those wrong, but you guys can fact check that if you want. I also think him having experience with guys who have not only more professional fights in some cases, but just better overall records, it definitely says something there that there is an aspect to his game where he's able to beat guys who haven't been beaten previously. So he's kind of gone in there, had that pressure. And then also what I would call out is him having a couple decisions is a benefit here as well, because in a matchup in Contender Series where he might be going up against a guy that's very skilled, he definitely has shown that when the going gets tough or has to go the full 15 minutes, he's been able to get wins in both of those matchups where he got decisions. So when you look at Caldas, obviously very powerful, and he could catch Zaynukov potentially and knock him out. I think that the fact that Zaynukov just had a bit more experience in getting decisions, but also finishes, says to me that he's going to be the tried and true guy to go the distance if it needs to be, because Caldas has yet to do that. And I know that that's not necessarily his fault, but basically the way I look at it is if he doesn't get the KO, he's definitely not going to get the win is how I would look at it. But it could be he gets a decision. You never know. I'm going Zaynukov. You guys do what you want with that. The next fight on the card, we've got Rafael Pergentino versus Luke Fernandez. Now, Rafael Pergentino, this guy is a ghost online. There's no age, there's no reach, there's just his 6'1" height, which I had to do digging to find, and his 5-0 record. So unfortunately, I don't have any other details for you guys. I did try to find it, but unfortunately, I just couldn't. So we'll just have to guess what his age is. But on the side of Fernandez, he's 30 years old, 6'2", no reach listed online, 5-0 record, 0-0 in the UFC. Both these guys 5-0, obviously. When we look at Pergentino, he's got 3 of his 5 wins, 60% by KO, 2 of 5 by submission at 40%, and then 0 of 5 by decision, of course. And then when we look at his losses, he's got none, so nothing to talk about there. When we look at Fernandez, 4 of his 5 wins by KO, 80%, and 1 of 5 by decision at 20%. So also on his side, no losses, so we can skip through that. Both gentlemen have a 5-fight win streak. The Rafael last fought on May 10th, 2025. His last 4 fights, he had a win over Garnier, who's 3-2, a win over Santos, who was 8-4, a win over Rodriguez, 0-1, and then a win over Viana, who was 1-0. And on the side of Fernandez, he last fought on May 24, 2025. So both these guys are on similar schedules there. He had a win over Edwards, who was 7-3, a win over Ellis, 8-5, a win over New, 4-2, and then a win over Romans, 1-0. Jumping into the intangibles and X factors, neither of these fighters are home fighters. Obviously, Luke Fernandez is a United States fighter, so he's a bit more of a home fighter than Pergentino would be. But red flag I got to call out on the side of Rafael Pergentino. He is a heavyweight fighter. Generally, like when you look at his Tapology, he's listed as heavyweight. So that could mean he is having a massive weight cut because this bout, from what I saw, is at light heavyweight, 205 pounds. So that you have to take into consideration here. And then other variables that I think are a bit red flaggy is that there's not a lot of details for him online that I can find. And so because of that, when I look at Fernandez, he has, minimal experience as a professional, but so does Pergentino. But one thing that I really like to see on Fernandez's record was he has grappling and submission wins over in grappling contests over UFC guys that are previous UFC guys, and Eric Anders and Phil Hawes. So big wins, especially Eric Anders, who's got some credentialed grappling. For him to get a win over Anders in a grappling competition definitely says he can mix things up when it comes to that side of the house. So guys, because of that, and because of the lack of info on Rafael, I got to go with Luke Fernandez. I think it's the better pick here, especially knowing that he has some grappling chops that he'll be able to mix in against Rafael. Now, Rafael's got submissions, so he could latch up a submission potentially. But when I think about Fernandez going in there, he submitted Phil Hawes. Not that Phil Hawes is like this great grappler, but he is a strong fighter. And then looking at Eric Anders getting a win over him, who has like collegiate experience with wrestling. I just think that Fernandez is probably going to have a deeper bag that he can pull from to get the win here. The next fight on the card, we've got Adrian Luna Martinetti versus Mark Vologdin. Okay, now when we look at Adrian, 30 years old, 5'8", 16-1 professional record, 0-0 in the UFC. And when we look at Mark Vologdin, he is 25 years old, 5'5", 12-3 professional record, 0-0 in the UFC. Looking at Adrian and his wins, he's got 4 of 16, 25% by KO, 6 of 16 by submission, and 6 of 16 by decision. Both of those 38%, coming into a nice 100% in terms of his wins. His losses, he has 1 loss on his rather big career thus far in 17 fights by decision. So no KOs or subs that he's gone through, at least as a professional. On the side of Mark, he's got 6 of his 12 wins by KO, 50%, 4 of 12 by submission at 33%, and 2 of 12 by decision, 17%. When we look at his losses, he's been subbed 1 time, 33% of his losses overall. That sub did come, I think, early on in his career, so it's not too much of a red flag there for me. But then 2 of his other losses came by way of decision, 67% overall for those. Now, looking at Adrian, his momentum, he has a 14-fight win streak. He last fought March 28, 2025. His last 4 fights, got a win over a guy who was debuting, so not a great look there. A win over a guy, Meza, 8-3. A win over a guy, Garcia, 13-10. Not a great record, but tons of experience. And then a win over a Dos Santos, who was 12-4, which I rate pretty highly. That's a solid record. When we look at Mark, he's on a 7-fight win streak. He last fought on June 14, 2025. He got a win over Montenegro, who was 7-4. A win over Baptista, who was 8-6. A win over Montenegro, 6-5. I think that those are brothers. If I'm just looking at the last name, they had different first names. And then a win over Contender, who was 3-6. So what I like here is, at the very least, although some of the fighters on the Adrian side had, a plethora of fights. He also has the debutante who was 0-0. Whereas on Mark's side, at the very least, his last 4 fights, each of those fighters had at least 9 fights total in their professional career. Now, when I look at the intangibles and X factors, guys, obviously neither one of these guys is from Vegas, it looks like. And then also the pressure, of course, they're fighting for a contract, so tons of pressure there. The red flag I got for Adrian is what I've already kind of mentioned to you guys, is that he has his recent win over a guy who was debuting as a professional, which is not a good look, in my opinion, especially coming from that fight into the UFC. But regardless, he does still have wins over guys, like I said, who are 12-4, 13-10, guys with tons of professional experience. One thing I got to call out too, having a 16-1 professional record going into Contender Series is pretty nuts. Like, I have not seen, I don't think, any fighters that have had like a 16-1 record. That is you got guys who are like 21-5. Usually when you get guys in the double digits, they tend to also have a few losses on their record. So for Adrian to be that competitive thus far is pretty solid. Now, Mark, on the other hand, when we look at him, I just have a red flag that I think he's going to be a bit small for bantamweight at 5'5". Now, it's not to say that he's like the smallest of the bunch, but definitely on the lower end in the bantamweight division when you consider guys like, O'Malley, Sandhagen. You got guys that are, I feel like even 5'6", they tend to be a bit smaller in that division. So he's definitely going to have that working against him here. But some other variables, I think he's definitely a solid fighter when you consider the fact that he's got wins over guys who have several more professional fights than he does, and he's only 25 years old. Now, I'm going Adrian Martinetti, guys, and the main reason is just when you boil down the fact that he's 16-1, I mean, he's got a plethora of experience. He's a bit older too, so he might have just a bit more of that grown man strength to him. But I think that Martinetti's got, obviously several wins by KO, several wins by submission. He's gone to decision a lot. He's definitely going to be the more grizzled fighter in this. I think he has more experience there. And the fact that he is 16-1 just says to me that he finds a way to win in these matchups. So I like picking Adrian in this fight. I think he will get the W. Admittedly, though, didn't do a ton of tape review, guys. So if you're seeing different things in either guy's game, I mean, definitely, consider that as well. I just think that Adrian, when you compare his experience, his age, just things seem to be lining up on his side. Also, not even to mention his size advantage. If we're going off of this is the script, right? 5'8" to 5'5", 3-inch height advantage. I'm sure there will be a reach advantage there as well. And the last fight on the card, guys, and obviously, like I said, there could be another fight that's mixed in here that I won't get to, so apologies if that happens. But the last one, we've got Imanol Rodriguez versus Roque Jr. Now, Imanol Rodriguez, a familiar face, one of the tough season, whatever fucking season they're on, alumni. The most recent season, he was on the Daniel Cormier team, if I'm not mistaken. Now, Imanol is 25 years old, 5'2", 5-0 record, 0-0 in the UFC. And the reason I say 0-0 in the UFC, he has some Ultimate Fighter wins, losses. However, those are considered exhibition matches. They're not included in here. So when I'm saying UFC XP, he technically has some experience, but it didn't count as a professional win or loss. And so I can't include it there, right? Now, when we look at Roque Jr., 25, 5'4", 10-2 record, 0-0 in the UFC. When I look at Imanol Rodriguez, his wins, his losses, 4 of his 5 wins by way of KO at 80%, 1 of his 5 by way of submission at 20%, 100% finish rate for our boy Rodriguez, right? On the side of Roque, 8 of his 10 wins by KO, so 80% KO rate on his side as well. 1 of 10 by submission at 10%, and then 1 of 10 by decision at 10%. He has only lost by decision in his professional career. As you can see, he's got 2 losses by decision. Now, Imanol Rodriguez, he's on a 5-fight win streak. 9/22/2024 is when he last fought. Now, guys, 9/22/24 is when he had his last professional fight. He did fight twice on the Ultimate Fighter. He won his first bout where he knocked out his opponent there. He then ended up losing a split decision to Joseph Morales, who actually ended up being the only Chael Sonnen guy to win in the Ultimate Fighter finale. And he actually just recently won. I think it was actually on the Poirier card, if I'm not mistaken, Poirier versus Holloway. He got a win over Alibi, but I call him Alibi because it's fun. Anyways, when I look at his last 4 fights, right? So I don't include that he lost to Joseph Morales. That is a solid notch of experience, though. Just being in there with a guy like Joseph Morales, who's so grizzled. He's a grizzled vet who's got experience. So I think that that's a huge plus for the side of Rodriguez. But when we look at his actual professional wins, he last fought 9-22-24, got a win over Trujillo, who was 9-4, a win over Hill, 4-2, win over Baruman, 2-2, and a win over Gomez, 3-0. And he's got the Mexican fighting spirit, right? You can never second guess that or doubt that, right? Now, on the side of Roque, he has a 3-fight win streak. He last fought on March 23rd, 2025. His last 4 fights, he got a win over Passin, 10-4, a win over Jara, 4-1, a win over Natan, 7-0, and a loss to Araujo, 20-6. So, that's not the worst loss, especially considering it's a decision. Guy had 26 professional fights. Not anything too crazy there from my end. Now, when I look at the intangibles and X factors, guys, Imanol Rodriguez, I think he's got more pressure here, guys, because although it's still for a contract, he has that exposure and that pressure cooking test of being on the Ultimate Fighter. He's going to have a lot more pressure, I think, here to go out there and make a statement and get his way into the UFC. Red flag I call out is, like, obviously his record doesn't show it, but he has lost. Like, I watched him lose to Joseph Morales. A lot of people thought it was a robbery, but regardless of how you look at it, he lost in that matchup. So it's not like he is going in there with the confidence of an undefeated fighter in reality. Like, sure, undefeated as a pro, but his last outing was a loss in the octagon. And so when you also consider the fact that the Ultimate Fighter cage is basically the exact same as Contender Series, he's really going to be going into the place that he last lost, is the way I look at it. What I would say is another variable, though, is that Imanol has showed a lot of great skill sets in his matchups on the Ultimate Fighter. He obviously got one of his wins by way of finish. And then against Joseph Morales, had a very close fight that went to split decision. And Joseph Morales is no easy feat or, easy night at the office, if you will. Roque, on the other hand, not the home fighter, tons of pressure for him as well. He has lost decisions in the past, also, close decisions. And so you could argue that him being in any type of fight where he goes to decision, it might not go his way. Especially statistically speaking, him only having one win by decision in his career. What I would say on the side of Junior, though, is that he also, although he's lost by decision, he has solid experience. And when you consider the fact that although Imanol has the tough experience, technically he has more fights on his record that's actually shown. Even if you consider those tough fights, Roque has 12 professional fights versus 7 in that case. And so I think he's just going to have a lot more experience coming into this. And actually, guys, that is where I am leaning picking Roque Jr., mainly because I do think that Imanol is very good. But what I also think is when you look at, like I saw in Tapology, I think like 89% of people are picking him to win. And I think that he's getting a little bit of that marinade and that sauce from Tough. Now, obviously, having that exposure, working with some of the best coaches that you can work with, being at the UFC PI while they were doing all of the tough shooting, he's definitely going to have a lot more layers to his game that maybe Roque doesn't or hasn't had access to just yet. But I do think that in this case, you have a guy in Roque Jr. who's never been finished. Also shows to have very lethal hands. He's going to be the bigger guy as well. And from an age perspective, these guys are literally, I think, 1 month apart. I feel like this has all the writings of, Roque going out there and getting a W. But like I said, I could be dead wrong. Imanol, I think he obviously is a very good fighter and he has every opportunity to win this as well. I just think that I didn't like to see how many people were heavily favoring him, given the fact that I don't know if they're considering some of those aspects where he's kind of walking into the place that he just lost in, whereas Roque Jr. is coming in fresh, hasn't fought in the UFC before, gonna have those jitters, but I think that those jitters will still apply to Imanol as well because he's not in the UFC yet. So he's going to have that pressure of like, fuck, the last time I did this, I didn't get it. I got to get it this time. That pressure could either make or break him in this fight. I feel like Roque Jr. is definitely probably a good underdog. I don't know if he's an actual underdog. I'm just basing when I just saw who was picking who in terms of the Tapology picks. I have to bet that Roque is definitely an underdog in the sense that 89% of people are picking Imanol. So I hope that this is helpful for you guys. Thank you so much for watching this video and any of my other videos. I really hope that if you're a fan of MMA, that you've checked out some of the other content on Fight Feed and that you will continue to enjoy and watch that content. Make sure to subscribe if you haven't already so you can stay on top of all that content. And then also, just one more time, I'll ask if you guys could give this video a like, share it around. Also, I would love to hear from you guys. Let me know who you are picking in Dana White's Contender Series Week 9. Thanks again, guys, and I will see you in the next one.